Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. We're joined today at Writers at Work by Mailan Doquang, whose debut novel, Blood Rubies, was published in May by Mysterious Press. Like most first-time novelists, Mailan comes to us from a different discipline. She's an architectural historian who earned her PhD from New York University's Institute of Fine Arts. Her publishing experience prior to Blood Rubies was on the subject of the art and architecture of France in the Middle Ages. Her book, The Lithic Garden, Nature and the Transformation of the Medieval Church, explores the meaning of ornamentation in church design. But Blood Rubies has nothing to do with her area of study. It's a fast-paced thriller set in Thailand and New York, where she now lives, and it draws its inspiration from another aspect of Mailan's background I trust she'll be willing to discuss. Mailan Doquang, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
Mailan, I've never written a thesis for an academic degree or an advanced degree. I imagine, given your credentials, you had a high level of aptitude doing that kind of thing. Did you?
I think aptitude is something I developed over the course of my studies. So, getting a master's and then a PhD is a years long process. And those skills, the research skills and the writing skills, are definitely something I honed during coursework. And then over the course of writing my thesis, things got better.
Did you enjoy writing for an academic audience?
Enjoy is maybe not the right word. I would say it was really satisfying, personally, and just personally, because I was really, really passionate, and still am, about the topic that I was writing about. My area of specialization is medieval French architecture. My mom is French, and my dad went to school in France. I have tons of family there, and so the buildings are at once very distant because they're old and from a very different culture, but at the same time really personal for me.
This is a diversion, but you must have been very saddened by the fire at Notre Dame.
Devastated.
I was there, Mailan.
You're kidding.
No, I was
Oh,
200 yards away.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to see um, how well the restoration is going.
Agreed.
Do you know anybody who's working on it?
Not anymore. I'm fairly distant from the field now. I mean, I have friends who study the building, but no one who's involved directly with the restoration.
I see. So when did you start writing fiction?
I started about 5 years ago. Um,
Really?
yeah, it's a very recent thing. I'd never taken a creative writing course, and I'm not the person who always dreamed of writing fiction. Even it actually came when I reached a crossroads, sort of in my professional life. I published a book, an academic book, in 2018 with Oxford University Press. And I realized at that point that what I loved most about academia wasn't the research or the teaching, though I enjoy both those things, but it was really writing, like the process of creating a narrative, putting it down on the page. And then, I also realized at that point that I wanted to step away from academia. So I don't want to say that it was a spur of the moment decision to write a novel, but it definitely wasn't the most considered decision I've ever made. I'd never taken a creative writing course. I knew nothing about commercial publishing. And in some ways I was really good, because if I had known the challenges that lay ahead, I don't know that I would have, forged ahead with so much, without a care in the world, basically.
Were you teaching at that period still?
On and off. I
I
was
see.
teaching. I just wrapped up my book. I think I last taught maybe at the beginning, when I first started writing fiction, but the bulk of Blood Rubies I wrote during lockdown, and I haven't stepped foot in the classroom since.
I was just going to ask, was there a period where you were doing both?
Not really. So I stepped away from formal academia. I still work, I freelance now for in academic spaces, but I don't teach anymore.
Okay. So your initial foray into writing fiction was Blood Rubies?
No, actually, I had an earlier attempt, and I can sincerely say that it stank. It was I wrote a novel, and because I didn't have any training in this and didn't know what I was doing, it had 12 point of view characters or something absolutely ridiculous like that. And so, but it was good enough that I actually signed with a literary agent at the time, and he shopped it around. It didn't lead anywhere, which was a huge disappointment because, as so much effort goes into creating a manuscript, even a bad one. And so after that happened, I realized that I wanted to pursue it. I wanted to keep doing it. I really loved it. And so Blood Rubies is my second effort.
I see. What did you learn from your failure?
Um, I learned to be more focused in terms of storytelling. So I think my downfall with my first effort was that I wanted to tell the story from everyone's perspective.
Right, right.
And that doesn't work, or it can work, but there are examples where I think that Julia Phillips has done it really well. I think with Disappearing Earth, written a story, a thriller, from multiple perspectives. But for me and the kind of story that I wanted to tell, it really needed to be more focused. And so I've always been one who learns by doing, so nothing is wasted. I learned many lessons with that first effort, and also just on a practical level, I've cannibalized that manuscript, descriptions of places or moods and things like
Mm.
that. So nothing is lost. Nothing was lost.
That's why the word failure is inappropriate because we always take something away from it.
Absolutely agree.
And in your case, you took a variety of things from it, including some concepts that you brought forward to your next work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now your protagonist, Rune Saracen. Am I pronouncing that
You
properly?
are. You are.
Okay. So she's half American and half Thai, which is pretty helpful when she's running around New York and Bangkok. Um, but it's not exactly parallel to your um, biography, as you alluded to earlier. But you sort of have this dual uh, upbringing that you share with her, correct?
Absolutely. And it seems like it would be a natural thing for me to write a mixed race character because I'm mixed race myself. My father is Vietnamese, went to school in France. My mom is French. They immigrated to Canada, which is where I grew up. But it actually wasn't my intention at the outset to write a mixed race character. I actually started with setting because I was just doing what I'd always done in my academic work, which is write about place.
Right, right,
So I really wanted to set the story in Bangkok and New York. New York has been my home since graduate school, so over 20 years on and off. And my husband did his research in Bangkok, so I had many opportunities to go there and visit, and just really fell in love with the city. And so when I first started writing, the protagonist wasn't mixed race. She was just an American woman who was in Bangkok. And I quickly realized that didn't make a lot of sense. That I needed her to make sense in both places, and that a compelling way of doing that would be to make her be from both those places. And once I came to that decision, it was something I really leaned into. And then I was able to draw on some of my experiences growing up mixed race in Canada and mixed culturally as well, because my parents are French speaking and put me in an English language school. And so there are many parallels, though I never went through sort of the traumatic experiences that she goes through.
sure,
Um,
sure.
but certainly some of the microaggressions that she faces sort of in her day to day, these are things that are either that I experienced directly, or that my siblings did, or other people who I know who are mixed race went through.
You alluded to the importance of setting. Um, for me, setting is the thing. I mean, I don't really know how you could do a novel without having a very clear view of your setting in mind. And I love the way you brought us through Bangkok. You know the highs and lows and the ins and outs of the neighborhoods. And um, was that? Did you have to research that, or when you were in Bangkok, that was just your experience that you went to these various places, high end and low end?
Well, I think I'm motivated to explore whatever my setting is, and that's in part just because of my interests. I'm someone who loves architecture. I love cities. I love the built environment and urbanism. And so I tend to visit. I like all parts of cities. I like visiting places that are, highly touristy, and then I like seeing places that are off the beaten track. And I think capturing them, I'm attentive to my environment, because my work depended on it for so many years.
Yes.
But that being said, I don't think that you have to go to a place in order to write it well. I think it's helpful. It makes things easier. It helps you know the smells and how it feels physically. And for Bangkok specifically, the story takes place during the rainy season. And
Right.
I've been to Bangkok in the rainy season, and let me tell you, it is not comfortable for someone who's not for someone who's not from that kind of climate. It's terribly uncomfortable. I don't know that I would have been able to capture it as well if I hadn't experienced it, but I think reading about a place, I think with all the tools we have now, with, street views and so many bloggers who are traveling, who are, posting videos about certain places, I think that you can sort of patch things together. um, for me, it definitely made it easier to go to these places. But I have to say, I've never been to the slum in Bangkok.
Yeah, and in fact, when I was asking the question, I was thinking, no, she hasn't been to some of those places
Absolutely not.
because they're really scary, and
They are.
I,
They are.
I wouldn't want to be there. So how did Rune develop as you progressed? Uh, I mean, at the end of the first draft, was she who she turned out to be in the end, or did you go back and give her new traits, or did she emerge fully formed? She's so vivid. How did Rune come to life?
She came to life piecemeal. So I don't outline. I start with a blank page, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I sort of muddle through. And so she's definitely someone who she came to life as I wrote. I knew that I wanted to write an anti-hero. I knew she was going to be a thief. I knew she was going to be bold. But the sort of the specifics of her personality came into being as I wrote, as I placed her in these different situations, and then I backtracked a little bit to make her more cohesive. But she was always going to be, you know, a fearless person, a fiercely loyal person, and also a selfish person, and a bit of a jerk.
Right, right. Um, so when you had the manuscript together and you presented it to your agent, what was the reaction?
The initial reaction was a revise and resubmit.
Right.
And so my agent, who is Liza Fleissig, who is absolutely incredible, has a great editorial eye. And so she liked sort of the bulk of it, had a number of changes that she wanted to see. And so I went ahead and made those changes. But ultimately, she was very enthusiastic and very supportive from the outset. And because I'd done my research and I liked her client list. I am a fan of many of her clients, and so I trusted her vision, and that process was really rewarding in the end.
So, yeah, you didn't have to go through this sort of contentious rejection process that writers can go through.
Oh, there
Uh,
was plenty of rejection. There
I
was
see, I
she's not
see.
she wasn't the so I didn't query broadly. She was in my sort of top tier of agents. So I don't even know if I received rejections from the others, but there was definitely rejection, if not from the querying process, then definitely during the submission process. So I was not spared rejection.
Right. Well, it's not a process for the timid or easily dismayed, is it?
No, it is not.
No. Did you? I mean, did you ever? And I think I can guess the answer to this question because you're a willful and dedicated person. But did you ever think that maybe writing novels is not for you?
Um, no, it never occurred to me to give up. Because I had gotten enough positive feedback, even on the novel that didn't sell, that first one, that I knew I could figure it out. And I was confident that eventually I would connect with the right people. Um, and I don't know if that was just wishful thinking. Probably it was, because I think that um, there's a fair amount of luck involved in this business. Um, but no, it never occurred to me to give up.
Mm. So and then you get the offer from the publisher. What was your reaction?
I was on the floor. I was so thrilled. I was thrilled because the submission process wasn't, it's not like it sold in a day. It was a process. Was one that involved a fair amount of rejection and revision as well. And so when I finally got the call from Louisa Smith at Mysterious Press, I was just so thrilled. And as an academic, I'm someone who really values expertise, and I feel like I landed with the mystery thriller experts. And so yeah, I couldn't be happier with that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is it too soon to ask you what's next?
No, it isn't. I actually signed a two-book deal, and so manuscript two, which is the sequel to Blood Rubies, is in my editor's hands. And I'm working on a third manuscript, a standalone about a Vietnamese art curator whose life unravels after she becomes the victim of a hate crime.
Wonderful. We have been speaking with Mailan Doquang on this episode of Writers at Work. Mailan, thank you so much for sharing with me your journey towards the publication of your first novel, and I'm sure you'll have great success ahead. All the best.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.